Welcome back to the Dare to Dream podcast. My name is Gregory Russell Benedict, and this is a podcast all about challenging you to embark on the adventure of your life. Today, we have a special guest for you guys. I'm sitting down with my good friend, Jonathan Van Putten. He is a breathwork enthusiast, a facilitator, and expert. He's one of the nicest people I've ever met. He gives the best hugs, and I'm really excited to chat with him today about his dreams. Welcome to the show, Jonathan.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm stoked to be here and appreciate the kind words.
We are going to have some fun today. And obviously, breathwork is on my mind. We did it last night together. We did it about 10 minutes before this. I'd love to hear about your journey into breathwork. What attracted you to it? Where are you now and where are you going?
For sure. Yeah, I really have an interesting relationship with the breath and the breath work. I come from Miami, and over on the East Coast, it's not as, kind of open-minded or as serious about, the yoga, the breath work, and kind of this whole movement going on out here on the West Coast and in California. But I came out here 8 years ago to chase a dream of being a big part of the switch to renewable energy in America, and came and co-founded a solar company up in the Bay Area. And, to make that long story short, I essentially ended up starting my own company, went through some business heartbreaks, went through some business breakups, had experienced a ton of failure in the entrepreneurial sales and marketing side of life, and essentially found my way from, Walnut Creek to San Jose, down to San Diego, aka the promised land, or home. I love it here. And essentially I found a spot here in Solana Beach 4 years ago and absolutely fell in love with this place. But I also was in the middle of a biggest heartbreak and was going to vices that I didn't find very healthy. I'd been addicted to pot for over a decade, smoking every day, basically all day. It allowed me to essentially move forward without feelings and allowed me to numb anything that came up so I could still strive for greatness, and always went to vices such as alcohol and different substances. And at this time in my life, especially, I was heartbroken from a few different business heartbreaks and was just over it. And I decided to take a break and just surf every day, all day for months. And basically into it, got invited to a cold plunge at this guy's shack over by Skyline Elementary in Solana Beach, and some breath work. Didn't think anything of breath work. I'd done meditation at the time. I'd done yoga, but didn't really even know what it was, right? It's kind of like, I like to explain it as high intensity interval training for the breath, right? Like it's a HIIT workout or a HIIT meditation.
Yeah.
But I wasn't going for that. I was going because I thought like an ice bath would be good. We used to do that when I played a bunch of sports in high school and college water polo. I always would go to the ice bath to like kind of rehab during tournaments or anything like that. And so I go over and I have this psychedelic experience doing Wim Hof breath, like 5 or 6 rounds, and just kind of go out of body, have all these downloads, like connect with myself in ways I never had besides when doing psychedelics. And I was like, this is the craziest thing ever. And then I go and I get in the ice tub and I see every color of the rainbow and have this like euphoric, crazy, like just serotonin, like adrenaline, just all this spike. I feel all of the blood come into like the essential organs in my body and just feel these sensations and connect with myself in ways I never have. And that's how it started. Like over 4 years ago, started doing that 2 to 3 times a week while they were opening up, and just still doing it out of the house. And, I kept getting this calling, just kind of how like I had that calling that I shared with you earlier about the big switch to renewable energy in America. I kept getting this calling to like teach breath work and bring this to the world, but I kept ignoring it because I couldn't, kind of my ego couldn't get away from the story of the renewable energy and the story of the solar, and that being like what I do, the solar, the batteries, the residential homes, and the financial security. And finally, a year and a half, 2 years ago, I was just like, at the very least, let me start learning about this for myself so I can implement this as my new addiction and my new vice. So it became more than just the Wim Hof and the actual ice baths. It became like, hey, I heard there's as many ways to breathe as there are foods. So let's start going through that. And now, I've got 5 different certifications in breath work to coach, to facilitate as a practitioner. I know over 90 breaths I can teach somebody, whether that's for anxiety, insomnia, high blood pressure, asthma, you name it, right? That we have an inner pharmacy inside of ourselves. And so now I'm on this mission to improve health and happiness through mindful breathing via the breath. Exactly. So that's like kind of a little bit of a long-winded of my story, but yeah, I basically just fell in love with the breath and have been able to work through addictions, 5 years of anger management therapy, like all sorts of different stuff that, you know, I think we just face and aren't vulnerable enough to like share with others, that I'm starting to finally, you know, be able to communicate. But, you know, we face all these crazy realities and we tend to go to things, whether it's, you know, pot, psychedelics, Xanax, Adderall. And it's like, I've learned to basically access those same things through the breath. And I'm now sharing that as my passion and as what I want to do with my life. So, yeah.
That is so powerful. And I want to go back to one thing you said about you heard the calling and you ignored it for a bit. There was the ego piece. There was you thinking that your calling was in the renewable energy. That was a story that you wanted to tell. What was it like when you had the first calling for breath work, and how did you ignore the call?
It was one of those, like, you know, when you leave a breathwork session, I don't know if it's ever happened to you, but you leave a breathwork session and you're like, whoa, like so much just happened. I need to write this down. I need to go journal. But you go home and you're like, actually, like, I'm going to bed. Or
Yeah.
like, actually, I'm going to just go work. It was one of those where it's like, I think I like wrote maybe a paragraph and like had so much more that came to me, but I stopped writing and ignored it and just kind of just kept going down the road. And it just kept popping up like once a month, like as I was going to these sessions. And um, it really just kept coming up, but I would keep like just being like, no, there's no way. Like me, like a breathwork instructor, like me teaching people to cold plunge, like no, dude, I'm the solar guy. Like
Mm.
that's my calling. Like that's what I'm doing. Um, so it was like just constantly ignored. And it wasn't until like I even did the whole health project. They have like an online university. I did that, learned like 20, 30 breaths. And I was like, this is so much more than just like prepping yourself for cold, realizing you can do anything and, you know, warming your body and getting rid of anxiety. It's like, dude, this is medicine. Like,
Mm.
this is medicine that needs to be shared with the world. And like, the question that keeps me going is like, why aren't we taught this in school or at work or like in any system? Like, I think this is something that, like, you know, they have dare, right? But it's like, what if dare had like a mindfulness program or taught us how to feel emotions or process emotions through the breath? And so it's kind of like what finally got me to actually lean into the dream and actually start going the coaching route, versus, you know, continuing to ignore it.
It's so funny because I met you a couple weeks ago, a couple months ago,
Mm-hmm.
and I only know you as Jonathan, who does breath work, who's a coach, who's into this, who does the has the Edco ISIG 9000 in the backyard.
One of a kind.
And yeah, it's so interesting what you said. I've always had that feeling of we need to learn this in school. We need to learn how to breathe, how to sit, how to walk, how to meditate, how to handle our emotions. We need to be taught that you are not your emotions, you are not your thoughts. You're the observer of these things. Like, oh my gosh, imagine high school or middle school or college or anything if you actually had emotional intelligence. I'll just speak for myself. Like I had the emotional intelligence of a rock, of
Yeah.
a pebble in the backyard, like incapable of feeling my emotions. We were talking about this earlier, like tried to just push them down, and that was seen as a good thing. That was like a manly
Yeah.
thing. You're like, oh yeah, emotions, I don't do those.
Yeah. And it's so interesting because that brings me to like, okay, there's masculine and feminine energy in all of us, right? And I think we're raised in a society where it's like that masculine and feminine need to be like man and woman. When it's like, no, we all have a feminine side, and the emotional feeling side of us like is so pushed down, and it's so towards like numbing or like go drink or go work out or go to anything that you don't feel it. Um, but I mean, I think everybody hits a point, and if they haven't already, they will hit a point where it's going to burst.
Mm-hmm.
And either you could wait for that point to burst, or you could realize that we have both of those inside of us, and we can actually take the time to start feeling our emotions, and also take the time to start actually processing stuff and sitting with ourselves, like you said, so that it doesn't get to that point, or so that we aren't just a reactive mess. Like for a large part of my life, I wasn't always calm. I wasn't always able to sit in silence. I wasn't able to always respond to hectic situations, whether that was with a partner or whether that was in business. I was so reactive, dude. Like, are you kidding me? Those business partnerships were probably 99% my fault. It was 99% me reacting or me not being the leader I needed to be at that time.
Mm.
And so it's just really wild that now it's like on the other side of that spectrum, all because I was like, dude, let's stop numbing the bad because I'm also numbing the good and I'm reacting instead of responding.
Yeah. It's crazy that you mentioned you had 5 years of anger management
Yeah.
therapy or training, whatever you called it, because you are literally a walking teddy bear. Like you're the calmest, chillest. The first time I came over here, you were just cooking breakfast. Like we hadn't really met yet. And you just like are offering me food. Some guy was walking past on the street. You're like offering him food too. It was just so inviting. So whatever you're doing, it's working, my friend.
Thanks, man.
It's working. So I want to go back to the first step. Obviously, you said you went to that ice bath in some dude's backyard. You did breath work in an ice bath and you had that experience. But what was the first step after that on that journey of starting to step into that breath work coach facilitator identity? Because that's the tough part. That's the tough piece, is making that identity shift.
It was honestly chasing getting high. Like I was, as I just shared with you, it's like I was addicted to getting high. I always say, hey, I'm addicted to feeling good, right? Like I'm a recovering egoholic. Like I was addicted to alcohol, addicted to weed. And really, I was just addicted to feeling good and addicted to affirmation. So I think the first step was starting to realize like my journey can be so valuable to the old me and that there's old me's out there everywhere. And I realized that they would probably need this. And maybe they wouldn't have spent the 6 figures in coaching, or maybe they wouldn't have spent the tens of thousands of dollars on therapists, and maybe they wouldn't have spent all this time hurting and ruining relationships if I just like stepped into that role and actually shared my story and started getting vulnerable. And once again, though, it wasn't really easy. It was like I was chasing the high, and essentially like I started feeling so much tingles and lightheadedness and started feeling these euphoric sensations and psychedelic experiences that I was like, just I'd be hanging with friends and I'm like, yo, you want to do something cool? And they're like, what? Like, yeah, dude, check out what we could do with our breath. I'd like walk them through some Wim Hof or what I thought was Wim Hof. And they'd be like, wow, this is pretty cool, dude. And then like one day I'm in Miami, like hanging with my parents, and we're at like Cartagena Park. It's this beautiful little like hidden nugget in Coral Gables, Florida. And I'm like, I had just started doing awaken breath work, which like shout out to Lucas Mack, like awesome dude. And essentially I started doing his online course, and I was like, hey, do you want to do this with me? Like I'll try and walk you through the best I can. And I did it with my parents. And it's actually on YouTube as like my first like breath work, like leading breath work experience. Because the first time I actually led people through like more than a couple minutes.
Mm-hmm.
And so we did this by like the water. And I was like, this is so wild. Like my parents are having an insane experience about this. They're seeing the value in it. And they're like from Miami, like never been exposed to the stuff I've been. My mom, did come from a kind of yogi background because of my abuela or my grandpa. And, she had a little bit of that, but my dad definitely not. And like, now I've like been with my like dad to like swamis, to like 100-person breathwork sessions. And my dad's been to like 2 breath for daily living sessions at High Vibe. And it's just seeing that it can impact everyone from like, I have kids in some classes as young as like 6 and 8 years old, the 12-year-olds to 15-year-olds to a bunch of people like our age in their 20s and 30s. And then even seeing like parents and even grandparents start to like see the value in this. It's like, dude, everybody that does it ends up being like, why isn't this something that I learned growing up? And I'm like, dude, yeah, that's literally what I'm wondering. I'm like, why isn't this?
It's crazy too, because like you said, it's so immediate. You feel so much better after it. Before we sat down to record this, we did, was it tummy breathing?
Yeah, I call it a tummy time.
Tummy time. Yeah, where we were just lying face down on the yoga mat, breathing into our stomach. You called it resistance training for your diaphragm.
Yeah.
And immediately, like maybe it was because I had too much caffeine this morning, but I was feeling a little anxious. I had that pit in my stomach, and just immediately, like 5 breaths in, I started feeling better. I started feeling more playful, releasing a lot of the pressure that I was putting on myself. And it's just like that. It's quick.
It's mind blowing, man. It's like 90% of Americans are chronic overbreathers. And why are we chronic overbreathers? Well, we breathe from our mouth and we breathe from our chest. Sometimes we don't even make it to our chest. A lot of people, you can look at them and they're just breathing in their throat, dude. Like they don't even make it to the chest. And we have this like ability to breathe from our stomach into our diaphragm, into our chest, into our throat, and even into our back body. that I've slowly been unlocking over the past year or two. I didn't know you could breathe into your back. It wasn't until somatic release facilitator training, which is the breath work you did yesterday with me, that I even knew you could breathe into your back body. I didn't know the breath hit the back. Like I thought it was just like belly chest. That's what I was learning the first 2-3 years. And so it's mind blowing because we're all breathing from our mouth, we're all breathing from our chest, and we live in the most anxious, depressed times ever. And you wonder why. Well, in Ayurveda, right, like the kind of yogic structure, they believe that all disease stems from the gut, right? Well, if you're breathing into your belly, which is what we were doing, right? We were doing stomach weight training, right? We were laying on our stomach flat and we were trying to hit that Homer Simpson or that Shrek, like I say, and trying to get that resistance of the floor pushing against it. And by doing that, we're training the diaphragm and the intercostal muscles here, which are literally muscles you have to train in order to fully breathe. And this diaphragm, once it's unlocked, it can go down to your stomach and come back up. So it's literally massaging all of your internal organs or massaging your gut. So if we're just breathing from our chest, of course we're going to be anxious. And if we're not connected to our gut, of course our decision making is going to be weird, or we're going to feel overwhelmed, or we're going to be living in the future, right? Because that's anxiety, right? You're kind of worried about what's going to happen. But when you take that deep breath, I always like say, like, the breath is the gateway to presence. So when you really stop and realize that, well, if you can extend that breath and really lean into it, you'll have this presence that you've never felt before. And that's what I owe the responsiveness and the, ability to not react and the ability to work through the anger is really that. Like the only thing of the 5 years of anger management therapy was like, I realized therapists like sometimes can just like basically make you just as angry as you were like before you showed up. But the best piece of advice I got was anger is a secondary emotion. And so that somatic release breath work helped me figure out what those emotions were beforehand. So the hurt, the sadness, the insecurity, the pain. And so it's like the fact that I even got like in 4 90-minute breathwork sessions more out of that than 5 years of anger management therapy, I think in my reality shows a lot of the power of the breath and how it needs to be integrated into therapy sessions or into these psychedelic medicines or into all modalities that people are going to, because it's a no-brainer.
Yeah, everyone needs it. Okay, so here on the Dare to Dream podcast, we like to go deep. We like to get vulnerable.
Come on.
We can always edit it out if we get a little too deep, but I would love to ask you, what were those emotions that you were masking with anger? Because you said anger is secondary. What was primary?
So I never realized I was an actual empath. I never realized that I could feel other people's emotions. And, I'd been doing sales for a decade and been building businesses, and I was always really good at it. And I didn't even know it was because I thought it was just like, I asked great discovery questions. I put myself in their shoes. I could read body language. I studied all of that, but I didn't realize that it was actually a gut thing and actually a heart thing, that I could feel other people's emotions. And it was to the point where that anger, right? And we talked about the feminine side kind of earlier. I was so scared to hold space for emotions that the second my mom, my sister, my girlfriend, or anyone in my life showed emotions, because my bros never showed emotions, dude. All my bros were bros, like I'm talking like before I met people like you in the past year or two of friends, like, I mean, we all were numbing emotions, like whether that was through whatever it was we were using, whatever vice. But basically, it was just the fact of the matter that I was hiding that I could feel emotions intensely, and I feel other people's emotions too. And I was so scared to feel it that I'd go straight to numbing. And so if somebody came to me with an issue, it's like, I was so against emotions that I just have, I mean, you might have heard some of my one-liners. I think like I pride myself in my ability to drop one-liners, but I just like would drop a one-liner and keep it positive. Like that was my motto, like law of attraction, law of positivity. Like not till I even heard of John DeMartini did I start learning about the polarity and starting to even relatively feel emotion after like a $4,000 breakthrough experience in San Francisco 5 years ago. That maybe, who knows, maybe that was the start of, the journey, but that right there really made me realize that in the somatic release training, it was just so evident when I was crying and when I was screaming and when I was like pounding the floor. As soon as that anger left, it was just a deep pain that I wasn't listening to the feminine side of myself, that I wasn't truly feeling any emotions, and that my addiction to pot and overindulgence in food, and really overindulgence in everything, whether that was surfing, whether that was working out, whether that was cleaning, it was literally coming from me trying to avoid emotions, whether it was my own or someone else's. And even though I'd meditated, I never sat with myself to actually feel emotion. It was always, how do I get through this, or how do I feel better? Never, what am I feeling? It was always, I am feeling this. Never, or I was always, I am anxious or I am sad. It was never, I am feeling anxious or I am feeling sad. There was never an observer for it because I didn't hold the space or take the time to feel absolutely anything.
That is so powerful and so interesting because as an empath, you feel other people's emotions in you. Like that is the definition. And so you were feeling, you were taking on other people's emotions and you didn't know how to deal with them yet. They scared you. So you were masking it with things and trying to always stay positive with the one-liners, the affirmations, all of that.
Yeah.
There's so much I want to go into here. I think that I'm all about positive thinking and affirmations and exterminating negative thoughts, all the things. But I do feel like it's easy to fall into this place where you're so afraid of feeling anything negative. If anything negative comes into your space, you're like, nope, nope, don't look at it, don't look at it, shove it down.
Yeah.
And it also like there's also the manifestation piece where it's like, oh, you have to be in this positive state to attract the things you want. And while I believe parts of that, I do think that so many people, and I've seen this with a lot of my clients who are all about spirituality and manifestation, is there's so much pressure to always be positive, to always be up. And from a human biological perspective, that's not what we were designed to do. We weren't designed to be totally happy, perfectly level-headed all the time. We, go up and down. We actually have way more receptors in our brain to feel pain and fear than we do happiness.
Yeah. It's mind-blowing to think that there's so many people out there just numbing and avoiding emotions and numbing and avoiding pains, whether it's alcohol, whether it's sports, whether it's, kush, whether it's psychedelics. And it's like they're looking for answers when it's like, dude, our body is so smart, and our heart and our gut is so smart, and we just don't take the time to listen, right? I got that like sign up there, when your body talks, you better listen. It's like that still is like a great reminder. Like even me, who's done all this work and is like doing the somatic release stuff and teaching others, it's like you're always a student, you're always learning. And it's like our body talks, dude, but we don't listen to it. And emotions are part of that speaking. And even the meditation, right? Like I did this transcendental meditation course and certification, and it was like one of the biggest breakthroughs there was like these thoughts, right? It's like thoughts become feelings, feelings become, actions. And so the thoughts, right? We tend to be sitting there and meditating, and the thought comes up, and we maybe like start thinking about it. The thoughts are actually our body's natural way of relieving stress or letting go of that story. And so it's so funny because when I was doing this positive thinking, right, it's like I'd be like, oh, like I am really insecure that my girlfriend is going out right now, and it's back in my college. And I would be like, oh, but she loves me, like it's all good, like she's like happy with me, all is well. And I would start thinking about that thought and masking it, when it's like, dude, my body just wanted to be like, I'm feeling insecure, or like, I'm not feeling right about this, and just watch it float out. But
Mm.
because we focus on that and we try to change it or anything like that, the problem only gets bigger, right? And it's like you're stuffing a backpack. I don't know if you ever had a favorite backpack as a kid, or even, I mean, I think I did this in college too, but I'd always just stuff like everything in there, everything. And then all of a sudden there's a hole in it and it starts leaking out, or like stuff starts falling out. It's like, I feel like that's what we do with our emotions, or I feel like that's what we do with like not allowing ourselves to feel or to think certain things. Like we keep stuffing that bag, or we keep stuffing that everything inside of our body until our body can't handle it anymore. And we either start reacting, or we start, misbehaving, or we start just like losing it.
I'm laughing because Bill Burr has the best comedy skit about this ever. It's about being a guy and how you aren't allowed to feel your emotions. Anytime you want to pet a puppy, give someone a compliment, buy some flowers, you just have to shove that down. You
Yeah.
just shove it down because the second that you admit that you have emotions, your friend suggests that maybe, just maybe, you want to suck a dick. It's the funniest
I gotta
comedy
see
skit.
this.
And he says, like, that's the reason why men just die at 55. You're in a Denny's and they bring out your pancakes and they forgot to put bananas in your pancakes. You just have an aneurysm and you die, your head slams off the sticky table, and the last thing you hear before you die is your friend saying, he got bananas in his pancakes. What a fairy.
Dude,
Like,
that's epic.
I'll send it to you. It's so funny. It's absolutely not politically correct anymore, but super funny. And what you said is so interesting is that our body is trying to release an emotion, a thought. It wants to get rid of it. And then we see that thought and we're like, oh, let's cling to it. Like that must be true. Like, let's bring it back in. Let's think about it. Let's overanalyze it. When really it just is trying to get rid of that.
Yeah. There's a book, Your Body Keeps Score by Bessel van der Kolk or something like that, which is also a huge proponent of MDMA therapy. And I think like the guy is a genius. I love his work. I love what he's done. And he kind of talks about how our body does keep the score. And even what you experienced last night with somatic release breath work, it's trying to alleviate some of what's going on there. And one of the things you mentioned there really made me think about a conversation I had with someone that's extremely special to me. And they were talking about how like when women and men get divorced, men tend to die earlier than women. And when I think about it, right, it's like even my past friendships are like growing up, it's like to talk about impolitically correct. Like I'm from Florida, dude. Like I have Florida man inside of me, and like we ripped on each other all day, every day. Like that's how I grew up. That was our love language. Like, which it doesn't make any sense now, especially being out in California and how, you know, how much more kind people are, or at least fake in front of your face sometimes. And like, it's crazy because it makes sense. Like we're so scared to feel emotions, and we also don't have a safe space or a community as men, to the point that like we would die early. Like when people go through these hardships, or when they like their backpack's full and they can't take it anymore, it's like community and actually feeling it, or having these conversations, or being able to have a safe space and having like the people around you are extremely important. And I think we're having a pivotal time in the world where men are starting to gather in sacred circles. Men are starting to have the men's groups. Like I've never been hanging out with so many men and been at so many men's groups since I started doing breath work, and also just since I started doing all this, you know, self work. But I think we're finally getting to a point where we're realizing that. And I hope that statistic changes. I think where I'm trying to get at,
Yeah.
because it is crazy to see how, you know, girls are always having like, you know, they can go and have a sleepover, they can go on a trip, and they can hang out all the time. Whereas like you go and hang out with some of your bros, and it's like, there's only so much I can take emotionally because I don't even deal with my own emotions, bro. So as soon as that comes up, how about we go to one of our vices together and like chill out?
It's so interesting. Women can get together and just be with each other. There doesn't need to be an activity. Men always need an activity, right? Even with let's get together and do breath work, let's do an ice bath. Like there's some activity that you're all coming together, you're trying to solve a problem. And the funniest example of this in my life recently was that my roommate came home the other day with a PS4. Like none of us play video games. We don't really watch TV anymore. We're all kind of on that self-betterment journey. But we talked about it and he's like, dude, remember in high school where your friends would come over and you'd put video games on and no one's really paying attention to the video game, but you're just chatting, like you're actually going deep and talking about everything. And I was like, yeah, that makes sense. And that's what video games are with friends, I think. And so now we got Call of Duty, we're playing Nazi zombies, and it's not about the game. It's about like, okay, we have this thing that's distracting us so we can actually talk openly and honestly. And like, I don't have to stare, like I don't have to look in your eyes, right? Like we're doing this thing together, but we're also talking. And I think it's so funny, but I mean, it makes sense. Like it is hard, especially just when you meet a guy, to just hang out. Like I've met so many dudes recently through pickleball, and it's the best. It's like, dude, you want to go play pickleball? It's like, yeah. And like, you know, you're on the court, you're having conversations, you're getting to know each other. But if you were just like, hey man, like I just met you, you want to come over and like drink water and stare into each other's eyes? Like, not so much.
Yeah, there's a very select few I think that are there, but I'm hoping we're like progressing in time. And it really, what resonates right now is like, as men, right, we're we're disregarding the fact that we're human beings. And it's almost like we want to rebrand ourselves as like human doings,
Yes.
right? Like we all just want to do. And it's like, if we're doing, then maybe we can feel, or if we're doing, then maybe we can actually be a little more human. But I just feel like that quote right there of like, currently in society, we're human beings that consider ourselves human doings, and we're reconnecting with the fact that we are human beings. And it's like, when you can just be, when you use the breath as a gateway to presence, when you're just there and sitting with whatever comes up, there's so much magic and medicine in that.
Yeah. And we were talking about this before. We went on a walk before and we talked
We
about a
did.
lot. And that in my own life, whenever things get hard or there's a girl I'm talking to and she texts me and like things aren't going well, like my immediate reaction is work. Like I need to go out there and take over the world to prove my worth, to get things done. And we both laughed about cleaning. Like if there's ever emotions that are coming up, like let's ignore those. Let's go clean the entire house 6 times. We're going to feel better at the end of it. And yeah, for me, it's this journey I'm on of learning to feel my feelings and learning that what you were saying earlier, everyone's looking for answers. We're looking for answers about what we want to do in relationships, what our life purpose is, how we're going to make money doing things that we love. Our bodies are trying to tell us the answer all the time through emotions, and we're not listening. Every time it's trying to share that wisdom that's way older. Your emotional brain is so much older than your cognitive, your prefrontal cortex. Like that was the most recent addition, but your lizard brain, the emotional brain, has been there for thousands and thousands of years. That's trying to tell us answers, and we're trying to rationalize our way through it instead.
Yeah. It's wild. Even like my brother and sister, they just had like kids, right? Like they're both under a year old. They're both like little girls.
Hopefully not
They might
together.
be able to. No, we're not into incest. This isn't a Game of Thrones type family. This is more of a. This is the Van Puttens. And I couldn't be more blessed. Like my brother and sister both married the most amazing partner ever. Like couldn't be more grateful. And their kids are just amazing. But watching a kid, one, when they come out of the womb, they're not chest breathers, dude. Like they always breathe from the belly. Like I obviously am addicted to breath. So I just like watch people breathe sometimes. Sometimes it feels a little weird. I'm like, it used to be in solar. Like I'd look at like a nice roof with a south facing pitch, like a ton of sunlight exposure, and be like, oh, that's a nice roof. And like now I like watch people breathe and I'm like they're breathing right, like look at that nose breath into the stomach. But kids, they naturally breathe into the stomach. And just like you said, it's the first thing that develops. It's that emotional part of us. And it's like, you can't speak to a baby, but you can understand them through their body language and through their emotions and what they're going through. And it's like so cool to see a new human being like that and to be able to learn and to be able to see that that's really the truth behind us. There's so much you can learn from such a pure, untouched, spirit like that.
Yeah, so true. We know how to breathe when we're born. We know how to walk and move. Like if you've ever seen a little kid go to pick something up, they do like a perfect, like full, full range of motion squat. It's like perfect. And yeah, it's so interesting. We know these things. It's almost like we don't need to be taught these things. We need to remember them. We need to remember all of the innate knowledge that we come into this earth with before it gets whittled away by society and expectations and other people trying their best, but ultimately not helping. So I want to ask you, for people who are listening into this, maybe it's guys, maybe it's girls, doesn't really matter. We've talked a lot about men, young men. What advice would you give them if they're feeling anxious, they're feeling depressed, they're feeling lonely, they're having this anger? What would you recommend that they do about that?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think with each of them, they'll be a little different. But I do think that there's certain breaths that I would call anytime breaths or even water breaths, right? And if you YouTube either one of those, there's a great TED talk on like water, whiskey, blanking on the third one, but water and whiskey breath or coffee, right? Energizing breath, sleepy breath, and then water would be an anytime breath. You can have it whenever. And so, when you're feeling like reactive or feeling upset, at least for me, the biggest thing is actually just coming to your breath. First step, right? It's just like solving a problem, having the awareness. The first step is like taking a minute to just like, you know how the little Apple Watch is like, breathe 1 minute.
Yeah.
It's like breathe, but pay attention to what your breath's doing, right? Like, are you breathing from your chest? Well, that's probably why you're feeling anxious. Maybe you're disconnected from breathing from your stomach, right? Or are you breathing like 20, 30 times a minute? Okay, you're over breathing. Slow down your breath. What does slowing down your breath look like? Well, a good anytime breath is what the SEALs use, right? Like box breathing. Something as simple as that is a water breath. It's an anytime breath, whether it's 4 seconds in through the nose, a 4 second hold, a 4 second release, and a 4 second hold at the bottom. Start there. See if you could even work your way to maybe 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds, 5 seconds. See if you can get all the way to 30, 30, 30, 30. Right? Now, or maybe try 15, 15, 15, because even myself who breathes every day is a living example of this, has been doing breath work. I can't really get past the 15, 15, 15. So, but if you think about that, that's one breath a minute. Most people are breathing 25 to 40 times a minute, and they wonder why they're feeling anxious, why they're feeling angry. So that's one, as well as samurai breathing. Like I always take a deep breath in through the nose, out through the nose. And then I try to find my breath where I can't hear. I could even put it right here to the mic. I'm breathing through my nose, but no one can hear it anymore. I'm breathing so that my nose hairs aren't even moving. And I'm breathing so that I can maintain responsiveness. And so it's just having that awareness of what's going on. And then it's having that awareness of, okay, if I slow down my breath to a point where I can't even hear it, it'll be deeper. If I can send my breath into my belly or send it into the tightness, like sometimes I'm tight in my shoulders, sometimes I'm tight in my stomach. If I can start focusing on sending oxygen and breath into those places, I can feel the body soften, right? A lot of times, like we go into these situations and we like feel all crazy or tense. Well, your body's tight, right? It's like, how can you soften? How can you go in there and like with a softer approach and be more chill? Well, one, the breath, but also it's noticing that it's there, noticing your jaw is locked, noticing your shoulders are tight.
Noticing is so important. I remember when I worked in finance, I would always find myself deep into a spreadsheet and I'd become aware all of a sudden that I was literally just like hunched over like this,
Yeah.
like not breathing, like head to the side. I was like, no wonder I feel like shit right now. Like I'm literally look like a gremlin. And yeah, just realizing one, not breathing well right now. Let's slow it down. Let's pause. Let's try some of these breath work strategies, whether it's box breathing, samurai breath, and then just becoming present, which you can't really do breath work without becoming present. It's the best way I've found to anchor me into the present, to bring me back, to slow me down, to stop focusing so much on doing and just focus on being for a little bit.
And dude, like you just said it yourself. Like one of the main things I teach, like especially to beginners, is like posture. Like we live in a society where we are on our phone and we're texting. Notice how as soon as I go to text, my shoulders drop, like my posture kind of messes up. The pelvic doesn't tilt inwards, or like you know you don't have the tailbone the right way.
Yeah.
And so you're literally like here, and then on the computer it's the same thing. We sit here, whether it's on our lap, whatever. Well, real quick, an audience, you can do this too. Like go like this, right? Get in some bad posture and take as deep of a breath as you can. Let it go. Now get your chest out, your shoulders back, get in some good posture, and take a deep breath as you can. You can feel the difference immediately. Like there's not a single human I've ever showed that to that hasn't been like, whoa.
Yeah.
Like, are you kidding me? Like my posture is why I feel weird, right? It's like, yeah, your body language and your posture plays a huge role. And when you can kind of recognize that, like you did when you were in finance, like it's going to change your day. It's going to change how you respond to situations, and it's going to change how you feel because your body plays a major role in emotions and thoughts and in life.
It is going to change your whole life, your relationships, how you interact with the world, how you interact with others. I love that. Last question I want to ask you before I ask where people can find more about you and your breathwork company. Where are you going? What is your dream? If you really think about it, if you dare to dream, Anything's on the table. You don't have to be realistic. You have to be playful with it. Where do you want to be in X amount of years?
Yeah, so I think about this a lot. And it's funny, I think I had like 5 years where I didn't. I was thinking very micro. I was thinking very day to day, week to week, year to year, because I always like had been thinking a year, 3 year, 5 years down the road, and I kind of lost that. But recently on a big trip to Europe, kind of did all of Western Europe, Portugal, Spain, France. I got recommended this book, two books, The Big Leap and Be Your Future Self Now. And I reread them Audible, re-listened to them 2 or 3 times while I was out there, and finally got to ask myself that, right? What does 5 years from now look like? What do 10 years from like look like? And how, if I want to be there, can I start acting, and what actions can I do now? And it's like, I really always like, it's like McConaughey says, right? It's like, it's that you 10 years from now you're chasing. It's not anybody else. It's no other person. And I think since I've been doing that, I felt a lot more alignment, a lot more peace, and been able to make decisions a lot more with responsiveness rather than reactiveness. And for me, it's like 10 years down the road, it's like, one, I've realized that one of my core things that I love is being by the water with people I love, right? I love breaking bread. I love sharing amazing, space with people. I think, you think about all the greatest times in your life. A lot of times it's like sitting at a kitchen table or sitting on a couch or sitting with people that are really special to you, or sitting on the beach and either sharing food or even just sharing communication. So it's like, I know that that's something I want to continue to take with me. And how I see it is like 10 years from now, I want to be able to build this Breathapy business into an e-learning platform, which it already is, which Breath API, right? It's like, I want to be that e-learning platform, that, virtual reality breath work that you can kind of come to whenever you want. I want to make it accessible to people in prisons, to people in churches, to all of these spaces, from schools to corporations. And I want to build this up because I want to make it accessible to everyone. And I feel like in doing so, when you chase what you love, when you chase what you're, passionate about, anything's possible. And even when I did that in solar, it's like, that's how I've been able to live by the water the past 4 years, surf every day, have had amazing people around me, always been in great community. And it's like, I want more of that. 10 years from now, it's like, I know I want to be a father. Like, that's the person I'm chasing. I know I want to be a dad. I want to have a grom or two that, I'm teaching everything. I don't want it to just be employees. I don't want it to just be like mentees. It's like, I want to be an amazing father. I want to be able to have an amazing partnership. And I want to be able to have the freedom, time, money, everything to do whatever it is that comes up. It's like, I love the water. I know I want to have a sailboat. I know I want to be able to sail whenever I want, even live on a sailboat for 3 to 6 months. I always, a pirate looks at 40, Jimmy Buffett. I'm always playing that. Like, it's almost like my music like knows that I want to hear that song as much as possible. It's like the most played, like whenever I click create station or anything like that. And it's like, I do think that there's a little pirate born 200 years later in me. And, I want to be able to have that. I want to be able to go from just having properties on both coasts where I catch a sunrise from bed to like, I want to be able to watch the sunset from bed and not even have to walk down the street or like have to like go to a different part of the house. Like, I want to be able to just be in bed and watch the sunset and be able to have this financial freedom to be able to show people that when you do chase what you love, you can create any reality you want. The past couple of years has been a very deep inward journey. But before that, with the sales and marketing and entrepreneurial background I have, I was always great at creating outside. I was always great at hitting the goals, hitting the 3-year goals, hitting the 5-year goals, getting the company car, hitting 10, 20, 30, 40, 50K months. It was always great at creating outside. But I feel like these past couple of years and where I'm at now of going inwards, I've realized the alignment between both of those will actually create a life worth living, will actually create that 10-year, that 20-year, that 30-year goal where it's like, I'm a great partner, I'm a great friend, I'm a great community member, I'm giving back. And, I want to be a way better version of myself. I want to continue to be able to do whatever I want, but with less concerns about these earthly things that, sometimes are so important to everyone that impede them from chasing what they love. I want to be able to, if like something else like breathwork comes up where it's like, hey, I want to teach this. I want that ego or that story of whatever I was doing in the past to not get in the way, right? I want to create sustainable companies, right? I want to help people transition into more sustainable products, right? It's like more sustainable kitchen stuff, more sustainable, like all sorts of different stuff, right? I want to be able to do whatever I want when I wake up. And, I've been able to do that for the most part the past 5 years, but I want to do it on another level and on a bigger scale. I want to make it, less about me and more about, God, more about the community, more about giving back to everyone else. Because I think that, I always say leadership to me is like, you can't ask anybody to do something you don't want to do.
Mm.
And so for me, it's like being that example, being what I just shared with you, and attracting that into my life and being exactly that. Because I think everybody secretly wants that. I think everybody wants that freedom, that independence from money, that independence with time, to wake up without an alarm clock, to be able to do whatever it is that they want. And I know we can. I know anyone can. Sure, people are in worse situations. Sure, people are in better situations. But the reality is, I have friends from all walks of life that have proven that statement to be correct. And it's like, I can show you them, reach out to me on Instagram, right? VP, or on YouTube, Breathe with VP, right? Or Jonathan.Van find me however you want. And like, dude, I can share with you my story, but I even have like so many resources and so many people that I know that can connect with people to a point where it's like, oh man, like I can do anything. Like this person is just like me. And I think that's the power of even like why I'm stepping into this, right? Why I'm stepping into being vulnerable and being open about who I've been, what I've gone through, because I can't help everyone. Not everyone's been through the same story. Not everybody has the same background, but I do know that there's plenty of people similar to whoever is listening or whoever is going through something that can show them that this is the truth. This is the way.
I'm so glad I asked you that question. That was one of my favorite answers I've ever gotten about someone's dream. I can tell you really care about it. You've really thought about it. And what you said about, I just want to live by the water with people I love, that hits home. That hits me in the heart.
Mm.
And one of the best nights I've had in San Diego was when we were here making your famous guacamole. We were all around this table right here. And we went out back and we had that potluck. And there was old friends, new friends. And we were just, like you said, breaking bread by the water, enjoying community, slowing down. Man, that's what it's all about.
It is, man.
Dude, Jonathan, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. You are such an inspiration in my life. You are positively impacting so many people. Your smile, the hugs you give, dude, you are making a big difference in the world. So thanks for being you.
Thank you, Greg. I appreciate it. Thank you for having me here. And I love watching your journey too, and love what you're doing, man. I think like anybody that's looking to figure out their dreams and get clear on their life and be able to really break through, I hope that they're watching your podcast and watching what you're doing, because just as you said, man, like you're an inspiration to me. I love surrounding myself with people that make me better. And you've always been that since I met you, bro. So thank you.
Thanks, man. I received that. We both have that shared dream of showing people that you can pursue the things you love. And it's actually through that that everything becomes possible. That's when the doors open up. That's when you meet the right people. That's when you attract the life. You create the life that you're meant to live. It's when you're focusing on what your heart's telling you to do. So good.